Have you ever wondered what it was like to live in North America in the late 18th century? Imagine, if you will, a landscape dotted with burgeoning colonies, where people from all walks of life sought to carve out a new existence under the imposing shadow of British rule. This was a time of extraordinary change and unprecedented challenge, a crucible that would forge a nation and shape the course of global history. The seeds of discontent were sown in the fertile soil of economic hardship and political frustration. The colonists, who had traveled across the Atlantic in search of a better life, found themselves chafing under the yoke of British rule. They were expected to pay taxes to a distant monarchy, yet they had no representation in the British Parliament. This was taxation without representation, and it did not sit well with the colonists. The economic restrictions imposed by the British were another source of contention. The colonists were forbidden from trading with any country other than Britain, and they were forced to use British ships for all their maritime activities. This stifled the growth of the colonies and kept them economically dependent on Britain. The colonists yearned for economic freedom, but it remained tantalizingly out of reach. The British also imposed a series of laws known as the Intolerable Acts, which further inflamed the colonists' resentment. These laws closed the port of Boston until the colonists paid for the tea they had destroyed during the Boston Tea Party, and they allowed British soldiers to be housed in private homes, among other things. These laws were viewed as an affront to the colonists' rights, and they fueled the fires of rebellion. As the colonists grappled with these challenges, their sense of identity began to shift. They started to see themselves not as British subjects, but as Americans. They began to dream of a future where they could govern themselves free from British interference. As resentment brewed, the seeds of revolution were sown. This was the beginning of discontent, the spark that would ignite the American Revolution. One of the defining moments of the American Revolution was undoubtedly the Boston Tea Party. This wasn't your typical elegant afternoon tea. No, this was a brew of rebellion steeped in a harbor and served ice cold to the British Empire. In the fall of 1773, the 13 colonies were simmering with resentment. The British Parliament had just passed the Tea Act, granting the East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. This was the last straw for the colonists, who had long been protesting against taxation without representation. In response, a group of colonists in Boston decided to take a stand. On the chilly night of December 16th, around 60 men, some disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded 3 ships in Boston Harbor. They were armed with nothing but their resolve and, of course, a few axes. Over the course of 3 hours, these daring men tossed an estimated 342 chests of tea into the frigid waters. That's about 90,000 pounds of tea, enough to brew millions of cups. This wasn't just a protest, but a statement. The message was clear. The colonists would not swallow the bitter pill of unjust taxation. The Boston Tea Party was more than an act of defiance. It was a spark that ignited the powder keg of revolution. It galvanized the colonists, leading them to unite against a common enemy. The event sent shockwaves throughout the colonies and across the pond, marking a turning point in the struggle for American independence. So why does this matter? Well, the Boston Tea Party was a catalyst. It showed that ordinary people could stand up against powerful forces, that they could resist injustice, and that they could drive change. This spirit of resistance, this refusal to back down, would come to define the American Revolution and the nation that emerged from it. The Boston Tea Party was a bold statement of defiance and a sign of things to come. In times of turmoil, great leaders often emerge. As the American Revolution unfolded, several figures rose to prominence, their names forever etched in the annals of history. Among them, 2 stand out: George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. George Washington, a seasoned soldier with experience from the French and Indian War, was appointed as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. His military prowess, combined with his unwavering determination, made him the perfect figure to lead the colonies through the tumultuous times. Despite suffering numerous defeats, his strategic brilliance and resilience eventually led to key victories that shifted the tide of the war. On the other hand, we have Thomas Jefferson, a man of words rather than war. His eloquence and political acumen were crucial in rallying support for the revolution. As the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson crafted a stirring call for freedom that resonated with colonists far and wide. His words encapsulated the colonists' collective yearning for liberty and became the ideological foundation of the new nation. These two men, though vastly different in their roles, were united in their cause. Together they exemplified the essence of leadership, Washington with his military command and Jefferson with his powerful prose. They were the guiding lights in a revolution that seemed impossible to win. Their influence extended beyond the battlefield and the drafting room. They helped shape the values and principles of the emerging nation, setting the stage for a democratic society that would value freedom, equality, and justice above all else. These leaders were instrumental in turning the tide of the revolution. They stood at the helm, steering the colonies through the storm of war towards the shores of independence. Their courage, their wisdom, and their unyielding commitment to the cause of liberty were the driving forces that propelled the American Revolution forward. And in doing so, they paved the way for the birth of a nation that would soon become a beacon of hope and freedom for the rest of the world. The Battle of Yorktown marked a turning point in the American Revolution. As the sweltering summer of 1781 drew to a close, a strategic chess game of military might unfolded on the shores of Virginia. American and French forces, led by General George Washington and French General Comte de Rochambeau, had laid siege to the British forces at Yorktown. The British, under the command of General Lord Cornwallis, found themselves trapped between the Franco-American forces on land and the French fleet at sea, effectively turning Yorktown into a cage from which there was no escape. The siege lasted for several grueling weeks. The combined might of the Franco-American forces, together with a successful naval blockade by the French fleet, slowly squeezed the life out of Cornwallis's army. Battered and beleaguered, the British were starved of supplies and reinforcements, their situation growing more desperate with each passing day. The defining moment came on the 14th of October. In a daring night assault, American forces captured two pivotal British redoubts, turning the tide decisively in favor of the revolutionaries. With his position now untenable, Cornwallis had no choice but to surrender. On the 19th of October, 1781, in a ceremony heavy with symbolism, the British Army marched out of Yorktown in surrender, their flags furled and their heads bowed in defeat. This marked not just a decisive victory in the war, but a monumental victory for the cause of American independence. The victory at Yorktown brought the much-needed momentum for the revolutionaries. It was a moment of triumph that echoed across the Atlantic, signaling to the world that the United States was a force to be reckoned with. The Battle of Yorktown wasn't merely a military victory, it was a statement of intent, a declaration of the resolute spirit of a fledgling nation ready to take its place on the world stage. The signing of the Declaration of Independence was a historic moment. On the 4th of July, 1776, a document was put into effect that would forever change the course of history. This wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a promise of a new beginning, a declaration of freedom and independence. Penned by the likes of Thomas Jefferson, it boldly proclaimed the 13 colonies as free and independent states. This was a clear message to the British, the world, and to the future generations that the United States of America was here to stay. It signaled the end of British rule and marked the birth of a nation. The Declaration was more than a political act. It was a statement of human rights, a call to arms and a beacon of hope. With the signing of the Declaration, a new nation was born. The American Revolution left an indelible mark on history. It wasn't just a war, it was a powerful statement of self-determination and human rights. From the ashes of this upheaval, the United States emerged, a nation founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and justice for all. But the revolution's influence extends far beyond American borders. It ignited a spark that would inspire countless other movements for independence around the world. The democratic ideals championed during the revolution continue to shape global politics and societal norms. And the stories of those who fought in it, patriots, loyalists, and everyone in between, serve as powerful reminders of the human capacity for courage, resilience, and the pursuit of a better future. The American Revolution is not just a piece of history, but a living legacy, echoing through the centuries. So remember the sacrifices made by those who fought for our freedom when you look at the stars and stripes.